Hey y'all, thanks for tuning in. Before the video gets started, I wanted to say a quick something. When I video this in bits and pieces over, in this case, a period of several weeks, and just whenever I have time to work on the Jeep. And when I started filming all this, this episode, it was several weeks ago, and the world was a pretty crazy place, but it was nothing like it is now. I just want to take a quick moment to give everybody my best wishes. I hope everybody's staying safe and doing everything they can to stay healthy, and thinking of their friends and family and strangers and everybody. Just hopefully this will all be past us soon. We can get on to some sort of a normal life again. So anyway, y'all take care of yourselves, and let's get to playing with Jeeps, shall we? Hey y'all, thanks for tuning in. I'm Tommy, and today we're cutting the body of my perfectly good Jeep in half. So stay tuned, let's get to it. All right, y'all, so as you can see, I've got these cross braces welded to the tub. Try to keep it from flexing in and out very much. And then I've got two pieces of tape here, painter's tape, with a thin gap here between the two that's approximately the same width as the cutoff wheel that I'm gonna use. So first step is gonna be to cut this through on the body. And then after that, it'll be a matter of trying to get all the spot welds drilled out. So here we go. Okay, so for those of y'all who have not used a spot weld cutter, this is it. And what you do is you try to identify the spot welds as best you can. Here I already did two. And you center punch the middle of the spot welds. Usually that's good enough to hold the center of the cutter in place. And then as you push in, the cutting blades will get to the sheet metal, and then you only want to cut through the thickness of the outer layer of sheet metal. And once you get all those done, theoretically the metal will be separated from each other. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, sometimes if the cutter kind of starts walking on you a little bit, which happens sometimes, you can actually drill this out. Get a drill bit like an 1/8 inch drill bit or something like that, and put a more pronounced divot in these little punch locations, and sometimes that can help out too. These two seem to go okay, so I'm just gonna wing it, see how it works. So here we go. And that is about it. So we'll see if that ends up being deep enough. May have to come back and revisit some of these to make sure that I'm drilling deep enough, but we're gonna knock these other two out real quick. There we go. Now I got about, I don't know, 300 more of these. No, I don't know. We'll see. All right, so now we're gonna move into the inside of the Jeep. And as I pointed out before, all the seam sealer has been removed. And then I've gone and identified as many of the spot welds as I can. You can see this section here, they're on the bottom, on the floor, and then they move over to the vertical portion. And sorry, I know the glare is probably pretty bad, but that's about the best I can do right now. Anyway, those spot welds look to be all on the vertical portion. So that'll be next. Okay, so now we're moving back into the inside of the tub. And you can see I've drilled out the spot welds. Some of these, because this material is relatively thin, it can be pretty easy to cut through these with the spot weld cutter. So really shouldn't exactly be the end of the world, you know, given the nature of what we're doing here. So don't worry about those, but you drill them out as best you can, identifying all the spot welds along the way. Also notice how here the spot welds are on the vertical plane, not the horizontal. But in addition to the spot welds, there's a lot of seam sealer holding all these panels together. So while it is true that once you cut out all these spot welds, and if you could do it correctly, there's not going to be a metal bond there any longer, but there will be that seam sealer, and that's going to have to get busted. So what I found to be pretty effective is a one of these little multifunction tools, little oscillating blade on it, and sorry, that was loud. And but anyway, you run it through here and try to cut away as much of the seam sealer as you can. And that will also help you identify if you missed a couple spot welds. This will not cut through it, not without completely destroying itself in the process. So, you know, you might have to come back and drill out some more spot welds as you identify them. So let's see how that goes, see if I got them all identified. So once I've gone over it with the multi-tool and tried to cut away as much of the seam sealer as I can, I get a chisel. This one I happen to have sharpened a little bit, try to help it get under there a little bit, to try to separate the sheet metal and get a better idea if I actually did separate everything like it needs to be. Keep in mind, this is relatively thick. It is going to deform a lot of the sheet metal as it tries to work its way through there. Like I said, I'm not really worried about that. I can flatten that out and straighten it as much as I need to. So not really a big deal. Nothing I'm too concerned about right now anyway. So anyway, I'm going to get the chisel in here and see how well I did. I'm pretty confident there's at least another spot weld or two in here. I don't know if you could tell in the video, but the little multi-tool blade didn't just zip through everything. I think there's a little area over here and maybe over here. So we're gonna give it a little chiseling and see where we're at. So you can see just going in a little bit, I can lift up. You can kind of get a better idea that, you know, yeah, this area here, this area here, those look pretty good. So let's see if we can get over in here. I think right in here it might need a little bit more drilling. I think it might be all right. There might be a little bit more in there that I could drill out. There might be just a lot of seam sealer up in there. So we'll find out soon enough. Pulled it pretty well. That's maybe. Yeah, I think that might maybe clearance stuff a little bit better. All right, moving on. Yes. All right. So I think at this point, got a pretty good idea. And it's actually not that bad. I think for the most part I identified them. I thought there was one right here, but apparently not. So, yeah, so it may just be seam sealer on the other side underneath all this that may be holding this up. So, We're gonna keep chiseling some more and see what we can do. We'll try a little bit up here too and see how well this may separate. That's a lot thicker. It's not one, it's such a short flange right there. It's tough to get the right leverage on it to bend it over. May have to do that from underneath the Jeep, but we'll see. So let me show you what I've been doing on the other side and see how that's coming along. Okay, so before I show y'all the other side and what I've done over there, let me show you the driver's side, which I haven't touched yet in that regard anyway. So basically there's going to be several spot welds along this flange here. So those will have to be identified. There's also going to be 5 or 6 spot welds along this area. I think there may be some along here, I forget offhand. And the issue that I've got here is that when I back half the Jeep 4 years ago, I sprayed a kind of a cheap AutoZone bed liner in here. And in the process of removing that, it's actually ended up making it really difficult to identify my spot welds. So again, if you've got a stock Jeep and had plastic fender liners in here, you shouldn't have any problem, because those will be, when it's just raw painted or just painted sheet metal, you can identify spot welds pretty easily. But now that I've gone through here and wire wheeled it, it kind of removed some of the texture here. I identified 2 of the spot welds, but that's it so far. So I've got some work, my work cut out for me ahead. And then of course, identified spot welds on the outside, like but I've already showed you on the passenger side there, but these have been drilled out as well. So let me move over to the passenger side, where I've already started drilling out some of these spot welds and separating the panels, and show you what that looks like. All right, y'all, I don't know if there's a glamorous side to doing a TJ6 conversion, but if so, this ain't it. This is the ugly part. So a couple of things here. First, you got these spot welds along here, which it looked like there were maybe, I don't know, 8 or 9 or so. It's really difficult to get the spot weld cutter in here, just because of the curvature of the fender flare, and you got frame rails underneath. And so basically what I ended up doing is using just a regular drill bit, poorly, and drilling out these as best I could. Again, it's something I'll have to address when I go to put everything back together, but for now, I'm just focused on getting everything separated so I can move forward with the project. So these are horribly ugly and drilled out and mostly separated. There's a little bit of clearance issues that I got to, a little bit of remaining sheet metal that I got to cut through, but that's not really a big deal. And here's those other spot welds. And like I said, I did a better job removing the bed liner over here with helping me identify the spot welds a little bit better. So I was able to locate these. I ended up drilling, I think, an extra hole or so, or maybe 2 in here. But now this section, pretty separated there. And all along here, this is all separated. I don't know if that really shows, but so you can kind of get an idea that. And this screwdriver is protruding into the tub inside the Jeep now. You can see the tip of the screwdriver inside the Jeep. Anyway, also these screws, these spot welds over on the side over here, there were 5 on this side, 6 on the other, go figure, who knows. Maybe my Jeep was a Friday Jeep. Anyway, so, but you can see here, if I can get a screwdriver in here, those 2 panels pretty separated as well. So, I think there's some seam sealer in here. I know right along the inside here where the stanchions for the roll cage and the seat belts and everything go, I think there's a lot of seam sealer in there. That may be a bit of a challenge, but we're gonna keep moving forward and try to get all that stuff cut away and get the other side spot welds cut out. Like I said, this is gonna be a pain on the other side, but see what we can do. Well, I don't know about y'all, but this is the moment that I've been waiting for. The body is finally in 2 pieces. So let me show you around where it came apart and what I had to do to make that happen. All right, let's start on the outside here. This is the passenger side. So here's our original cut all along down here. There was one more spot weld right here that I discovered later on. See some of that seam sealer stuff all up in here. All the spot welds where those were drilled out. This mess of spot welds that were cut out and just holes made, and you can see the internal part of that sheet metal on the front half. So yeah, that's what it took on the outside. And then in here, there was one more spot weld right up here, bunch of seam sealer all along there. This was kind of a pain to deal with. It wasn't too bad, but basically you need to, I just took a long screwdriver. In fact, here's the mess of stuff that I've been using, this long screwdriver, just kind of coming down in here and just kind of hammering it down and kind of chiseling a lot of the seam sealer out of the way. With regards to a lot of the spot welds, you can see all those drilled out. Again, most of them, a lot of them, not necessarily every one of them, but a lot of them did go all the way through the sheet metal, but I'm not really too worried about it. A couple things I did, used a punch to, before it was separated, I would put it right there on the sheet metal and pop it, and then you could see a gap between the, the sheets of metal here. And that was kind of a nice way of going around and verifying that the sheet metal, the spot weld was busted. But then again, you also have all the seam sealer all around this whole perimeter, so you got to deal with that. So that's when the chisel would come into play. Obviously, that's going to bend the sheet metal up, but I looked at that as kind of a necessary evil. Not really worried about it. Like I said, in the scope of the whole project here, dealing with some bent sheet metal, I really don't care. I'm not really worried about it. So let's see, what else? Just trying to give you all some. So yeah, just one spot weld up there. The rest of that's all just seam sealer until you get down here. And so then the whole inner fender is still intact with the, I guess you'd call the bed of the tub. And so anyway, one thing to point out here is that's going to be really nice and better than an LJ in this regard is the fact that once this is done, these fender wells are going to be farther back than they would be in an LJ. So I'm actually going to get a little bit more bed space or interior room out of it, which was a nice little bonus. Anyway, all right, let's see here. Moving on. There's the other side. You can see very similar. That one, I don't even know if it had a spot weld up there. I think they might have missed. So not really an issue there, but there you go. Let's look at the other side. And, whoop, sorry for it's a mess in here. But anyway, here's the other side. This one's really mangled too. I did manage to find the spot weld locations on here. Basically had to feel for them, especially down in this area here. Because I'd sprayed that bed liner on there and then tried to remove it with the wire wheel, and it just kind of made a mess of things. So, but I could feel in there and kind of, identify them for the most part. By the way, so with these guys here on the flat portion here, I basically just took like an 1/8 inch drill bit, drilled through the spot weld, and then took a skinny unibit. In fact, it's this little guy here, and just wallowed these out at an angle like that. And basically that's what I did for those. So it's not exactly elegant, but hey, it got the sheet metal apart. So again, more, nice little spider web and more seam sealer, a bunch of dirt and crap. And yeah, so there we have it. 2 pieces. I did have some body mounts in here. So there's one. That's an aftermarket. This is a cross member that I added when I back half the Jeep. Trimmed the middle there for the pumpkin for the 4-link. And then obviously it's got the Genrite tank back up in here. And here's what I had to do to the rear of the body because the frame sits so high. I had to clearance that and kind of basically French the body around the frame rail. I'm going to be addressing that. I was running a super slender body mount in there. I'm going to change that up with this revision of the Jeep. So anyway, let's see. I think we're ready for the next step. Well, there we have it. First big phase of the conversion is done. The body is cut in two. Next will be to focus on the frame and getting it extended. And what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to pull the rear axle, the stock rear axle. Well, it's only the stock housing that's left stock in it. But I want to get that out of there, and so I can sell it and make a little room in the garage, because I am doing all this in a 2-car garage. And I'm going to roll in my Sterling new rear axle and put it in place and just kind of mock it into position, supporting the frame just with some probably scrap steel or whatever for the time being. That way I can roll the frame out on the new axle, put the graft in the 15-inch pieces of frame rail, put it all back together, and then once that's in place, I'll fabricate all the rear suspension once everything's in place and the frame's supported by the jack stands and all that. Then it'll be time to put all this back in place and graft it to here, build new floors, and all that kind of good stuff. So anyway, that's it for this episode. Ran a little long, sorry about that, but I really appreciate you following along. If you haven't, please consider liking and subscribing, and really appreciate it, and I'll see you at the next one.